The rain had been falling since 5 o'clock, and by the time Maya-chan finally ducked under the awning of the amber room, her blazer was soaked through and her carefully flat-ironed hair had given up entirely and gone wavy. She stood in the doorway for a moment, shaking water from her hands, squinting into the warm amber light of the bar as though she were coming in from a different world entirely, which, she supposed, she was. The world she was coming in from was one of cardboard boxes, bubble wrap, and the particular kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from moving across an entire country in 3 days. She'd driven from Portland to Chicago with 2 suitcases, a carry-on, a box of books she refused to leave behind, and the persistent, low-level anxiety of a woman who had just accepted the most important job of her life and wasn't entirely sure she deserved it. Senior graphic designer at Looming Creative Agency. The words still felt foreign in her mouth, like a language she was just starting to learn. She'd been saying them to herself in the car for 2 days. Senior graphic designer at Lumen. Senior graphic designer at Lumen. Like a mantra. Like a prayer. She was 28 years old and she was terrified. The amber room was exactly what she needed. It was one of those bars that looked like it had grown organically from the walls of the building rather than been installed. Dark wood paneling. Leather bar stools worn smooth by decades of elbows. A long mahogany bar with a brass rail that gleamed under the low lights. Jazz played from somewhere low and smoky. The bartender, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, nodded at her as she came in. Maya found a stool at the end of the bar, the kind of corner spot that felt protected, and peeled off her soaked blazer. She draped it over the stool beside her and ordered a glass of red wine, something Chilean, mid-range, not the cheapest option but not extravagant either. She was going to be careful with money until her first paycheck. That was the plan. The plan lasted approximately 8 minutes. That was how long it took for the woman to sit down next to her. Maya heard her before she saw her. The sound of someone settling into a bar stool with a particular kind of composed grace. The quiet thud of a bag being set on the bar, the soft clearing of a throat. Then she smelled her perfume. Something warm and complex, sandalwood maybe, with something citrus underneath, and she turned just slightly. Out of instinct, the woman was, and Maya would spend a great deal of time in the weeks that followed trying to find the right word for what this woman was. Striking. Not beautiful in the conventional, immediately obvious way, though she was certainly that too. She was the kind of striking that came from something internal. Some quality of presence or confidence or intelligence that arranged itself across someone's features and made them impossible to look away from. She was perhaps 34 or 35, with dark brown hair cut in a clean, elegant style that fell just past her jaw. Her skin was a warm olive tone, flushed slightly from the cold, and her eyes, when she glanced over and caught Maya staring, were a remarkable shade of hazel, greenish and golden at once, like light through autumn leaves. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white silk blouse, and she wore them the way women wear clothes, when they have stopped trying to dress to impress anyone, and have simply started dressing for themselves. She was the most beautiful woman Maya had ever seen in real life. Maya looked away so fast she nearly gave herself whiplash. Long day? The woman said. Maya turned back slowly as though she hadn't just been staring. Sorry? The woman nodded at Maya's wine glass, which was already half empty. You're drinking like someone who had a long day. Maya laughed despite herself. Is it that obvious? Only a little. The woman's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but the beginning of one, like it was being considered. She had a voice that was low and measured, the kind of voice that seemed accustomed to being listened to. I'm having one too, if it helps. Long day. It does, a little. Maya extended her hand. Maya, Rowan. The woman shook her hand, firm, warm, brief. Then she turned to signal the bartender. What are you drinking? Oh, I'm fine. I'm ordering a bottle anyway. Glasses are wasteful when you're doing serious drinking. She said this entirely without irony, as though it were simply a logical observation. Unless you'd rather be alone. I can absolutely respect that. No, Maya said before she could think better of it. No, company sounds good, actually. Rowan ordered a bottle of Malbec and 2 glasses, and the bartender brought them without ceremony. She poured for both of them and settled back against the bar, turning slightly so she was facing Maya at an angle. An easy posture. The posture of someone who moved through the world without performing comfort, who simply was comfortable. New to Chicago? Rowan asked. Maya blinked. How did you know? You keep looking around like you're cataloging the room. People who live somewhere stop saying it after a while. A small pause. Also, your jacket tag is sticking out. It's from a Portland boutique. Maya reached back and tucked in the tag and laughed. A real laugh this time, embarrassed but genuine. That obvious. What brings you here? A job, Maya said. I start Monday. She hesitated, then added, I'm a graphic designer. I just got hired at Well. It's a creative agency. Bigger than anything I've worked for before. I keep wondering if they made a mistake. Rowan studied her. Why would they have made a mistake? I'm not sure I'm ready for it. Are you qualified for it? On paper, yes. Then you're probably ready for it. Rowan said this simply with a certainty that wasn't unkind. Imposter syndrome is almost always a sign that you care enough to be scared. People who aren't ready usually aren't scared enough. Maya looked at her. That's a surprisingly comforting thing to say to a stranger. I'm full of those. The suggestion of a smile again. What field are you in, if you don't mind my asking? Branding, mostly. Visual identity, brand strategy. I did some editorial work in Portland, but this is more corporate, I suppose. Higher stakes. The clients are bigger. Rowan nodded, listening with what felt like genuine attention, the kind that was rare in casual conversation. She asked good questions, not invasive, but curious. She wanted to know about Maya's work in Portland, about what had made her take the leap, about what she was most excited to explore. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look at her phone. She made Maya feel in the way that very few people do in a first conversation. Entirely worth listening to, Maya found herself talking more than she normally would. She talked about the freelance years before she'd gotten hired at her agency in Portland, the grinding uncertainty of that period, the way she'd built her portfolio piece by piece. She talked about her specialty. She had a particular gift. She'd been told for color and typography, for the way words could be arranged on a page to create emotional responses that the words themselves didn't quite explain. She talked about loving the moment when a brand's visual identity clicked into place. When you saw the thing you've been working toward and knew, suddenly and completely, this is it. Rowan listened to all of it. Then she said, You love it. What? Your work. You light up when you talk about it. She said this without sentimentality, a simple observation. That matters. More than people realize. Maya looked at her, really looked at her for a moment, studying the clean planes of her face in the amber light. What do you do? She asked. For work? Something shifted slightly in Rowan's expression. A small, contained smile. I'm in the creative industry as well, she said. Leadership side mostly. Operations, vision, that kind of thing. Do you love it? A pause, then most days, yes. Some days it feels more like, she searched for the word. Stewardship. You love something, so you take care of it. It's not always exciting. But it matters. That's a beautiful way to think about work. Rowan looked at her. The look lasted a beat longer than a casual glance. It's a beautiful night, she said instead of responding, glancing toward the rain-streaked window. In a miserable way. Maya laughed. The best kind. They drank their wine. The conversation moved, as good conversations do, without clear direction, following its own logic. They talked about Chicago, which Rowan knew well, the neighborhoods, the particular way the wind came off the lake in winter, the way the city felt different in summer and winter, and how both versions were worth loving. They talked about books. They both recently read the same novel, a quiet literary one about a woman returning to her hometown. And they had precisely opposite reactions to the ending, which led to a 30-minute debate that was the most alive Maya had felt in weeks. She found herself watching Rowan's hands as she talked, the way she used them sparingly but deliberately, the way her long fingers wrapped around her wine glass. She found herself watching the way Rowan's eyes moved when she was thinking, the slight inward quality of her gaze as she assembled her thoughts. She found herself, and this she noticed with a kind of startled awareness, leaning slightly forward on her stool, orienting toward Rowan the way a plant orients toward light. Oh, Maya thought. Oh, this is a problem because Maya had been in this situation before. The specific, inconvenient situation of feeling immediately and intensely drawn to a woman she'd only just met. It had happened exactly twice in her life before, and both times it had ended with her heart in pieces and her dignity barely intact. She was supposed to be starting fresh. Not dramatically, Sophia said, with the careful phrasing of someone who has turned a painful thing over in their hands many times and worn down its sharpest edges. Just, we became people who loved each other but weren't right for each other. She knew it before I did. She was always quicker than me. Nadia had absorbed this piece of information, the pronoun, the she, with a feeling she would later identify as relief mixed with an alertness. Mixed with something she was not quite ready to name, she had shared her own relevant history a Saturday later. In her own careful way, she had dated over the years 2 women and 1 man. And none of the relationships had lasted longer than 8 months. Not because of dramatic endings, but because she had. Each time reached a point of closeness and then pulled back. Retreated into herself and found the relationship too fragile to survive her retreat. I'm not easy to be close to, she said. This was not self-pity, just information. I'm aware of it. Sophia had looked at her with those steady honey brown eyes and said, most interesting people are easy to be close to. That might be generous. It might be true. There was a quality to Sophia's attention, to the way she listened. The way she looked at Nadia when Nadia was speaking that Nadia was not accustomed to. Most people in Nadia's experience listened to respond. Sophia listened as though what Nadia was saying was a building she was studying, taking in the proportions and the details and the structural choices, trying to understand not just what was said but how it was built. It was. Nadia thought the most intimate thing anyone had done in a long time. In November, Sophia invited Nadia to a gallery opening. A friend of hers was exhibiting paintings, large, abstract canvases in shades of ochre and deep blue, and Sophia mentioned it on a Saturday in the same careful, casual way she had of mentioning things she actually cared about, as though it didn't matter, while her hands went still in her sketchbook. You don't have to come, Sophia said. It'll probably run late and there'll be a lot of people who talk about art in the way that makes you want to apologize for art. I'd like to come, Nadia said. Sophia's hands resumed their work. But she was smiling. The gallery was in a converted warehouse on the east side of the city. Warm and buzzing, the walls hung with those great luminous canvases. Sophia moved through the crowd with the ease of someone at home in creative spaces, stopping to speak with people, drawing them into laughter. Filling the room slightly wherever she stood, Nadia watched her. This was a thing she had started doing. She realized, watching Sophia, not in a calculated way, not in the way of surveillance, but in the way you watch something that you find simply beautiful to watch. The way Sophia held her wine glass, the way she tilted her head when listening, the way she used her hands when she spoke, these eloquent, expressive gestures that were somehow both entirely unself-conscious and entirely precise. At one point in the evening, Sophia crossed the room and found Nadia standing in front of the largest painting, an 8-foot canvas of deep cobalt bleeding into amber at its edges, like a sunset seen from underwater, and stood beside her. What do you see? Sophia asked. The moment right before something changes, Nadia said. She hadn't planned the answer. It arrived fully formed. She felt Sophia go still beside her. That's exactly it, Sophia said softly. That's exactly what Camille said she was trying to paint. They stood in front of the painting together, shoulders almost touching, and neither of them moved away. Later, walking out into the cold November night, their breath making small clouds in the dark, the city lit and humming around them, Sophia said, "Can I ask you something?" Yes, Nadia said, and then because she wanted to be honest, I might not answer. Sophia smiled. Fair, do you ever get lonely? In your work, I mean, in all that quiet. Nadia considered this. I used to like the quiet. I still like it, I think. But it's starting to feel different. She paused. Less like solitude and more like absence. What changed? Nadia looked at her. The streetlight caught the angles of Sophia's face, the escaped curls against her neck, the small scar at her eyebrow. I'm not sure, Nadia said, which was not entirely honest. She was starting to be very sure. She simply wasn't ready to say it yet. Sofia looked back at her for a long, level moment that seemed to last longer than it was. Then she looked up at the sky, cloudy, no stars, and back at Nadia, and she said, "Me too." Different kind of quiet than before. They stood on the pavement outside the gallery, and neither of them moved toward their respective ways home. The city moved around them. A cab went by. Someone laughed in the distance. "Are you cold?" Sofia asked. "A little," Nadia said. Though she barely felt it, Sofia reached out and, without ceremony, tucked one end of her scarf, a long cream-colored scarf that had been wound twice around her neck, around Nadia's collar, so that they were briefly bound together by the same length of fabric, their faces very close. "Better?" Sofia said. Their faces were 6 inches apart. "Maybe less." "Yes," Nadia said. Her voice came out quieter than she meant it. Something crossed Sofia's face, some recognition, some question, and then she gently unwound the scarf and wrapped Nadia's end around her own neck once more, so Nadia could keep the warmth. And she stepped back. "I'll walk you to the corner," Sofia said. "Okay," Nadia said. They walked to the corner. They said goodnight. They did not kiss. On the subway home, Nadia sat with her hands clasped in her lap and her heart beating against her ribs with an urgency she felt in her teeth. And she thought, "I am in trouble. I am in very specific, very beautiful trouble." December arrived. And with it the particular tenderness of a city preparing for winter, lights appearing in windows. People walking faster, breath clouds in the dark. The cafe on Marlowe Street began its December decorations. Paper stars in the window, cinnamon in everything. And Iris wearing a rotating selection of festive earrings that were always a little startling and always, somehow correct. Nadia and Sofia's Saturday mornings had expanded. Not dramatically, but in the natural, incremental way of 2 people drawn into each. Others orbit, the gravitational pull so gentle that you don't notice it's changed your path until you look back and see how far you've traveled. They had exchanged phone numbers for logistical reasons. Sofia needed to tell Nadia the gallery event time. Nadia needed to tell Sofia she'd be 20 minutes late one Saturday, and then had begun texting. At first, occasionally. Then more regularly. Then, without having discussed it or decided anything, most evenings it was not romantic texting, or not obviously so. It was the texting of 2 people who had found in each other a good mind and wanted to share things with it. Sofia sent Nadia photographs of buildings she passed on her walks, a crumbling Victorian terrace, a glass and steel modernist cube wedged between old brick, an ornate doorway leading to what appeared to be a completely ordinary apartment building. "The threshold is always making promises the interior can't keep," she wrote once. And Nadia had stared at the message for a long time before writing back. Or maybe the interior has its own different promise. A private one. "Yes," Sofia had replied. Just that. But Nadia had felt seen in some way she couldn't fully articulate. Nadia sent Sofia sentences from her novel, not whole pages. Just sentences she was uncertain about, testing them on Sofia's ear. Sofia always responded not with "this is good" or "this is bad," but with her actual reaction. "This one made me stop," or "this one I had to read twice to get," or "this one feels like it wants to be the last sentence of the book." They were, in every way that mattered, close friends. They were, in every way that neither of them was saying anything about. Something else too, one December Saturday. Nadia arrived at the cafe to find Sofia already there but not working, sitting with both hands around her coffee, staring at the fire, not seeing it. She looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. Nadia sat down without speaking. She ordered her cortado, and when it came she wrapped her hands around it and looked at Sofia and waited. "My father called yesterday," Sofia said eventually. Nadia waited. He's not well. Not catastrophically. But enough." She stopped. "He doesn't know about me. My family, my mother and father, they don't know I'm gay. My sister knows. My brother, I think, suspects, but we don't talk about it. But my parents," she shook her head. "I've been meaning to tell them. For years. And then he calls and I hear in his voice that he's tired and not well, and I think about how limited the time is. And I don't know if I should just let him have the version of me he has, or if I owe us both the truth." Nadia was quiet for a moment. Then, what does your version of the truth feel like when you imagine telling him? Sofia thought about this. Like relief. Like being able to breathe fully. And also like a door that might not open again. Do you think he wouldn't accept it? I think he might surprise me. I think I'm more afraid of having been the one keeping the secret than I am of how he'll respond. She looked at Nadia. Does that make sense? Yes, Nadia said immediately. I've been carrying it for so long. The holding back. It gets heavy. Nadia looked at her for a moment and then carefully, deliberately, she reached across the table and laid her hand over Sofia's, just that. Still and warm, Sofia looked down at their hands and something in her face shifted, softened, and she turned her hand over so their palms met. They sat like that for a while, the fire doing what fires do. The December light pale outside the window, not speaking, not needing to. This was, Nadia thought, one of the most intimate moments of her life. And nothing had happened except the truth of two people sitting beside each other with nothing held back. New Year's Eve arrived and brought with it the question, unspoken but present, hovering above every conversation they'd had since December, of what they were. Nadia had been asked to a party by colleagues. Sofia had been invited to her friend Camille's loft. They had each, without telling the other, declined both invitations and had only discovered this at their Saturday café session in late December, when both their plans for New Year's Eve turned out to be, I don't know yet. Probably quiet. We could be quiet together, Sofia offered. Her voice was carefully light. We could, Nadia said. Equally careful, they decided on Sofia's apartment. Because it had a small balcony looking out over the city, and they could watch the midnight fireworks without going out into the crowds. Nadia would bring wine. Sofia would make dinner. Nadia spent an unreasonable amount of time on the question of what to wear, which was ridiculous, she told herself, because it was Sofia's apartment and they were friends, and she had met Sofia while wearing a slightly damp overcoat and sensible shoes. And yet she stood in front of her wardrobe for 20 minutes and finally chose a dark green dress she'd bought for a literary event the previous year, simple, elegant, the color of pine trees, and left her hair out, which she rarely did, and told herself none of this meant anything. Sofia's apartment was on the 4th floor of a narrow building that smelled of old timber and someone else's cooking. The door opened before Nadia could knock, which meant Sofia had heard her on the stairs, which meant Sofia had been listening for her, which meant Nadia stepped inside. The apartment was warm and lamplit, full of the smell of garlic and herbs. Books everywhere on shelves and stacks in the places where shelves had not yet been built. On every horizontal surface, sketches and reference books and the beautiful organized chaos of a working artist's life. And on the kitchen table, candles. Sofia was wearing a deep red wrap dress and her hair was down, falling in dark curls past her shoulders, and she looked like she'd also spent an unreasonable amount of time deciding. And Nadia felt the air between them shift in some almost tectonic way. You look, Sofia began, and then stopped. So do you, Nadia said. They both stood in the hallway for a moment, navigating the new territory of each other in this context, in these clothes, in this light, with midnight only hours away. Wine, Nadia said, holding up the bottle. Dinner, Sofia said, gesturing toward the kitchen. 20 minutes. They moved around each other in the kitchen in the way of people who have become comfortable, handing things and taking things without needing to ask. The domestic choreography easy and natural. Sofia made pasta, a proper Spanish-Italian hybrid of her own invention, with chorizo and saffron and cream, which sounded wrong and tasted extraordinary, and Nadia made a salad and opened the wine, and they ate at the kitchen table with the candles burning between them. They talked as they always talked, about everything, about the things that mattered, but something was different tonight. Something was closer. The wine, maybe. The candles. The awareness that midnight was coming, and with it the feeling that time was marked, that this particular now was bounded and specific and somehow asking for something. After dinner they took their wine to the balcony, small and cold and looking out over a city preparing to turn into a new year. The night was clear for once. The clouds that had been hanging over the city all week had moved on, and there were even a few stars visible between the buildings. They stood side by side at the railing, close enough that their arms touched. What do you want from this year? Sofia asked. Nadia thought about this. Less holding back, she said. I've been thinking about what you said. About how the holding keeps things heavy. Sofia was quiet for a moment. I told my father. Nadia turned to look at her. When? Last week. Sofia was looking out at the city. On the phone. It didn't go perfectly. He was quiet for a long time. But then he said, "You're still my daughter," and I cried. And he cried. And my mother called back an hour later and said, "Sofia, your father told me. We need time. But we love you." She paused. It was not the disaster I'd been imagining for 15 years. Sofia. Nadia put her hand on her arm. Sofia finally looked at her. Her eyes were bright. The things we hold back from the people who love us, she said softly. We think we're protecting them. But usually we're protecting ourselves. Nadia was looking at her in the cold, clear light of New Year's Eve, her heart very large in her chest. And she was thinking about holding back and about protection and about the specific quality of this woman's face in this specific moment, and she was thinking, now. This is the moment. Now or there won't be a right moment ever, but the fireworks started. Midnight arrived in a burst of gold and silver over the city, the sky cracking open with light and sound. And they both turned to look at it, this instinct, this reflex, and in the crowd noise below and the cascade of color above, the moment shifted, and Nadia felt it go. Like water through fingers, when the fireworks faded and the cheering below settled. They turned back to each other. Happy New Year, Sofia said. Happy New Year, Nadia said. They hugged, a real, warm, long hug, Sofia's arms around Nadia's shoulders. Nadia's face briefly against to Sofia's neck, where the scent of her was warm and familiar and entirely disabling, and then they stepped back. Because the moment had passed, or she had let it pass. And they finished their wine, and Nadia took a cab home and lay in her dark apartment looking at the ceiling with her heart beating hard and her blood full of fireworks. She had been on the edge. She'd been right there. And she had let herself back away. She fell asleep with her phone in her hand and woke to find a message from Sofia, sent at 2:00 a.m. I'm glad we did this tonight. I'm glad it was you. Nadia held the phone against her chest and looked at the ceiling and thought, less holding back. That was what she'd said she wanted. That was the whole point. She texted back, me too. Happy New Year, Sofia, and then she added, because she was trying, I want to tell you something. Not tonight. But soon. The reply came immediately, even at this hour. I'll be here. January unfolded and cold and quiet. Their Saturdays continued. Anchored now by something they had not yet named but both clearly felt, a kind of careful mutual recognition. Like two people approaching from opposite ends of a bridge. Nadia worked on her novel with a new urgency. She had reached the climax, the moment when her protagonist finally stopped running from the thing she wanted. She found that the chapter wrote itself differently than anything had written itself before, as though something in her understood, at last, the specific shape of the choice. She showed it to Sofia on a Saturday in mid-January. Sofia read it in the café, while Nadia watched the fire and tried not to watch Sofia read, and failed. When Sofia looked up, there were tears at the corners of her eyes, which she blinked away quickly. Nadia, she said. Too much? Perfect, Sofia said. It's absolutely perfect. How did you? She paused. It reads like you've lived it. I'm working on it, Nadia said. And Sofia looked at her with those steady, searching eyes. And this time Nadia didn't look away. On a Friday evening in the third week of January, they went to a film together, a French film about two women who spend a summer in Normandy and are afraid to say what they mean, and then one of them leaves and the other stands at the harbor, watching the boat go, and you understand. In that final image, everything that was lost to cowardice. Nadia walked out of the cinema with her throat tight, and Sofia walked out beside her and said nothing. And they walked in silence for half a block before Sofia said, I always want to reach into films like that and shake people. Me too, Nadia said. The boat is there, Sofia said. The words are right there. Nadia stopped walking. Sofia stopped 2 steps ahead and turned to look at her. They were on a quiet street, lamplight and bare January trees. The city continuing its indifferent life around them. Sofia, Nadia said. Yes, Sofia said. It wasn't an answer to a question. It was something else, an arriving, a consent, a readiness, and Nadia opened her mouth and found, for the first time in longer than she could remember. But the words were simply and immediately there. I need to tell you that I've been trying to work out how to say this since October. Maybe since the first Saturday. And I keep finding very good reasons to wait because I'm afraid of what happens to the Saturdays if this goes wrong. I'm afraid of you being someone I lose. But I think I'm more afraid of saying nothing. She stopped, took a breath. I'm in love with you. I've been falling in love with you since you told me you cried on your kitchen floor for my book. I think it's entirely possible I was in love with you before I knew your name. Sofia stood perfectly. Still, the lamplight fell over her face, and she was looking at Nadia with an expression Nadia couldn't quite read, too much happening in it. Too many layers moving at once. Then she crossed the 2 steps between them, and she took Nadia's face in both her hands. And she looked at her, really looked from this inches away proximity. And she said, I've been standing on that balcony on New Year's Eve for the past 3 weeks in my head, trying to find a way to go back and say what I didn't say. What didn't you say? This, Sofia said. And she kissed her. It was Nadia would spend years trying to describe it and would finally write it into her novel, and even then feel the description fell short. It was the gentlest and most devastating thing. Sofia's hands warm against her cold face, the sound of the city gone distant, the cold January air against the warmth where their mouths met. It was a kiss full of months, full of all the Saturdays and the texted sentences and the careful almost moments and the hand across the table and the scarf wound around both their necks for one brief, charged second in November, when they finally separated, gradually. Reluctantly, the way you come up from water, they stayed close, foreheads nearly touching. Hi, Sofia said softly. Hi, Nadia said. Sofia was smiling, that full, unguarded smile, the one with the warning. Took us long enough. Nadia laughed, and it came out a little unsteady, a little overwhelmed. I was building up to it. 3 months of building. I'm thorough. Sofia pressed her forehead against Nadia's, and they stood there on the January pavement, laughing quietly, their breath making little clouds that mixed together in the cold. Come home with me, Sofia said. I'll make tea. We can sit by the window. We don't have to do anything except be where we are. Yes, Nadia said immediately. Yes, that's exactly what I want. They walked together towards Sofia's apartment, and somewhere in the middle of the second block, Sofia took Nadia's hand, and it was the most natural thing in the world. And Nadia held on. Sofia's apartment at night was different from Sofia's apartment on New Year's Eve, or maybe Nadia was different in it, more alert, more present, more aware of the specific weight and texture of every detail. The books, the sketch pads stacked by the window, the small potted olive tree on the kitchen windowsill that Sofia had named. Nadia now learned Gabriel after her grandfather. The rug in the living room that was slightly too big for the space and overlapped the baseboards in one corner, which Sofia seemed to find endearing rather than bothersome. Sofia made tea, a Spanish herbal blend that smelled of chamomile and something warmer, darker like toasted spice, and they sat on the sofa with their legs tucked under them, turned toward each other, the lamp making a warm pool around them. For a while they didn't speak. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that had become natural between them, but texture now with something new, with the aftermath of what had just happened on the January street, and with the awareness of where they now were together. Are you nervous? Sofia asked. Yes, Nadia said honestly. Are you? Yes. Sofia curled her hands around her mug. Not in a bad way. Just because it matters. Yes, Nadia said. Exactly that. I've thought about this, Sofia said. More than I've admitted to myself. What it would be like. She looked at Nadia directly. What you would be like. Nadia's heart beat steadily and hard. And? Better, Sofia said simply. You're better than what I imagined, and I imagined quite a lot. Nadia set her mug down. She reached across the small distance of the sofa and touched Sofia's face, her jaw, the line of her cheekbone gently, studying her the way Sofia studied buildings. Taking in the architecture of her. Sofia closed her eyes for a moment. You're beautiful, Nadia said. I keep not saying it and it keeps being true. Sofia opened her eyes. There was something in them now that was clear and open and entirely without the careful guard that the early weeks had held, something that looked like full arrival. "I've been waiting," Sofia said. "For someone I wanted to stop guarding against." She paused. "That's what I realized about Priya in the end. I loved her, but I was always braced. Always a little held back." She looked at Nadia steadily. "I don't feel that with you." "I haven't since the second Saturday." Nadia looked at her. "The second Saturday. When you walked in and I had your table and you looked so carefully controlled about being frustrated, and then you said, 'Please don't move.' I'm being ridiculous," I thought. "She's someone who would rather be embarrassed than unkind." Sofia smiled. "I thought, I want to know this person." Nadia laughed softly. "I thought you were going to be terrible and you turned out to be everything?" Sofia suggested, and then immediately, "Sorry, that's too much." "No," Nadia said. "No, don't apologize for that." She held Sofia's gaze. "Yes, they were very close now, the tea forgotten. The lamp making them golden." "Nadia," Sofia said. "Yes." "Stay tonight." The words settled in the room like a note held long and true. "Yes," Nadia said. It was slow. It was luminously, deliberately, exquisitely slow. Sofia led her by the hand through the apartment, through the small hall lined with framed sketches, past Gabriel the olive tree, into the room at the end of the hall, where the window looked out at the amber-lit winter sky. They stood facing each other in the low light. And there was a moment, just a breath of a moment of pure stillness. Not hesitation. Not uncertainty. Just presence. Sofia reached up and touched Nadia's face again, as Nadia had touched hers. Mirroring, learning. "Tell me what you want," Sofia said quietly. "You," Nadia said. "Just you. Being close to you. However that looks." Sofia kissed her again, slower this time, without the street's cold urgency, exploring and tender and deeply, achingly intentional. Nadia felt herself unfold toward it the way a plant unfolds toward light, this complete and helpless tropism. And she thought, so this is what it is when you stop holding back. They came together in the way of people who have known each other long enough to move carefully and closely enough to mean it fully. Every touch was a conversation, every moment its own whole sentence. Sofia's hands in her hair, at her back, tracing the column of her spine with a focused, warm attention that made Nadia feel entirely seen, entirely present, entirely herself. Nadia's hands learning the territory of Sofia, her shoulders, the curve of her waist, the warmth of her at the hollow of her collarbone. At some point Nadia put her lips to the small scar at Sofia's eyebrow, and Sofia made a small sound and held her there. "That scar," Nadia said. "I've been wondering about it since October. Fell off a bicycle when I was 9, Sofia said. Trying to look cool. Did not succeed." Nadia smiled against her brow. "I think it's very charming. That's a generous reframe. I'm a writer. Generous reframing is my whole job." Sofia laughed. Low and warm, and the laughter moved into something else. Something serious and tender and private. And the night gathered around them and held them together. And outside the January city went on about its business without them. There was a point in the deep quiet of the night when they lay still together, close and warm. And Nadia was looking at the ceiling and listening to the city murmur below and feeling. She was trying to locate the precise feeling she was feeling. She realized entirely at home in her own life. Not safe in the small, defended way, but home in the larger sense, like she had arrived somewhere. "Are you awake?" Sofia said softly beside her. "Yes," Nadia said. "What are you thinking?" Nadia considered. "I'm thinking that I've been writing about people who are afraid to want things for 6 years. And I think I was writing about myself. What do you want?" Sofia asked. Nadia turned her head to look at her. Sofia was watching her in the dark with those eyes that saw clearly and steadily and all the way in. "This," Nadia said. "You, specifically and entirely you." Sofia smiled. The darkness made it very beautiful. She reached over and tucked a piece of Nadia's hair behind her ear, this small, careful gesture, and said, "That's convenient, is it? Because I have been wanting you for months and I have been extremely polite about it, and I am very relieved to stop being polite." Nadia laughed a real, Full laugh, sudden and unguarded, the kind she didn't always let out, and Sofia laughed with her. And the sound of it in the dark felt like something being released. Like something that had been wound tight finally. Finally easing open, they talked for a long time in the dark. The way people talk when they are close and safe and without an agenda, about their childhoods, about the things that scared them and the things that delighted them, about the first books they'd loved and the first buildings that had stopped them in their tracks, about grief a little, about loss. Sofia had lost a best friend at 22. Nadia had lost her grandmother the year before, and still reached for the phone to call her sometimes and felt the absence like a step you've forgotten is there. They talked about the future and tentative, exploratory ways, trying out certain words and phrases to see how they fit. I want to take you to Barcelona, Sofia said at some point. I want to show you where I grew up. The buildings. The light is different there. I always try to describe it and I can't. You'd find words for it. I want to go, Nadia said. I want to see the light you grew up in. You'd have to meet my family. I'd like that. My brother talks too much about football. I'll learn enough football to survive. My sister will interrogate you. I'm a novelist. I can handle an interrogation. She like you, Sofia said, and she said it with such certainty, such easy confidence that Nadia felt it like a gift. How do you know? Because she told me once years ago, when I described the kind of person I hope to find. You want someone who listens the way you do, closely, like it matters. She paused. You listen like it matters. Nadia was quiet for a moment. Then, so do you. We're both good listeners. We are. We'll probably have very detailed arguments. Probably, Nadia agreed. We'll argue about sentences and buildings. And about whose turn it is to sit at the corner table. Nadia laughed again. I'll arm wrestle you. I have strong hands from years of drawing. You'd lose. I'll use my wiles. You have wiles? Probably. Sofia turned on her side to face her. In the dim light, her eyes were warm and serious and entirely present. I'm going to make you happy, she said. Not a promise of grand gestures. Just a statement of intent, clear and quiet. I'm not perfect and I will sometimes be too much, and I sometimes need more solitude than seems reasonable to people who don't understand artists, and I forget to answer texts when I'm deep in a project. But I will pay attention to you. Always. I will look. Nadia looked back at her steadily. Her heart was full to the point of difficulty. I'll write you things, she said. Probably too many things. I'll overthink sometimes and go quiet and it won't be about you. It'll be because I'm in my head. But I won't expect you to know the difference unless I tell you, and I'll try to tell you. I'll try to stay open. That's all I want, Sofia said. Me too, Nadia said. Sofia reached over and took her hand. And they lay like that in the January dark, close and warm, and holding on. Morning arrived with winter light and the smell of Sofia's coffee, which was different from the café cortado, stronger, bolder, made in an ancient Italian stovetop mocha pot that Sofia had brought back from a visit to her sister in Milan and treated with the reverence of an heirloom. Nadia woke to the sound of it and the smell of it and the specific quality of Sofia's apartment. In morning light, the sketch pads, the books. Gabriel the olive tree catching a pale ray on the windowsill and lay still for a moment. Taking it in, Sofia appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs, wearing an enormous soft sweater and looking entirely at ease and entirely beautiful. Morning, she said. Morning, Nadia said. Sofia sat cross-legged on the bed and handed her a mug, and they drank their coffee in comfortable silence while the city woke up outside, and Nadia thought, I want this. I want this version of morning with this person in this light. I want it to be ordinary. I want it to be what I come home to. Over the weeks that followed, they learned each other in the morning light. How Sofia was quiet and internal for the first hour, not unfriendly. Just gathering herself, her thoughts moving internally before they were ready for the world. How Nadia, unusually for her, talked more in the morning than at any other time of day. Something about the looseness of just waking that loosened her tongue. How they each made eggs differently and worked out a system. How Sofia drew in the mornings and Nadia wrote in the evenings, and there was a rhythm to be found in the gap between those times. A life to build in the space they made. Their Saturdays at the cafe continued. Iris watched them arrive together for the first time and produced no reaction except to add a second cortado to Nadia's order without being asked, which was Iris's particular form of eloquence. They held hands under the table. Sofia's foot found Nadia's under the table without either of them directing it, just a quiet claiming. They still worked, still wrote and drew in parallel, still sat in comfortable quiet while the fire did what fires do. "This is the same," Sofia said one Saturday, looking up from her sketch. "It feels the same as before." "Better," Nadia said. "Better," Sofia agreed. "But recognizably the same. It's what I was afraid of, that something would change. That it wouldn't be this anymore." "It's still this," Nadia said. "It's still this," Sofia said, and went back to her drawing in February. Nadia's publisher invited her to a reading event, a conversation with another novelist at a bookshop in the city, followed by a book signing. She had done many of these. She was, by now, practiced at the public version of herself, the composed and thoughtful author who spoke about her work with precision and grace. She asked Sofia to come. Sofia arrived late. She texted from outside, 2 minutes. Sorry, tube was impossible, and slipped into the back of the seated audience just as Nadia was beginning to read. Nadia saw her across the crowded room, her dark curls and her rust-colored coat, finding a standing spot at the back and settling in, and she looked up and found Nadia's eyes immediately and smiled. Nadia looked back at her page. She read the chapter she had chosen, the climactic chapter, the one she had written in January. The one Sofia had called perfect, and as she read she was aware, as she had never quite been before at one of these events, of the person she was reading to, of the specific address of it. Afterward, at the signing table, Sofia waited until the end of the queue. When she reached the table, she placed her copy of the book in front of Nadia with a look that was warm and private and entirely for Nadia alone. "What should I write?" Nadia asked. "Surprise me," Sofia said. Nadia wrote, "For us who listened like it mattered from the beginning. All of it is for you." Sofia read it standing at the table, and her face did the thing Nadia had come to love best about it, that immediate, undefended response. The emotion moving across it clearly before she could decide whether to show it. "That's not a surprise," Sofia said softly. "That's everything." "I know," and Nadia said. March came, and with it the first intimation of spring, the light lasting longer, the trees beginning their tentative preparations, the air no longer quite so committed to cold. Sofia told her parents. Not about Nadia specifically. Not yet, that felt too new to offer to people still adjusting. But she told them she was in a relationship with a woman. Her father was quiet and then said, "Is she kind to you?" Sofia said yes. Her father said, "Then that is what matters." Her mother, who had had more time to process since December, said, "Tell her she's invited to Spain in August. I want to make her paella." Sofia called Nadia after both calls, and Nadia sat on the edge of her bed and listened to Sofia's voice on the phone, full of relief and love and the specific exhaustion of carrying something heavy for years and then, finally, being able to put it down. "August in Spain," Nadia said. "August in Spain," Sofia said. "You said you'd learn enough football to survive." "I did say that." "I've been watching YouTube videos." "You have not." "I really have. I know what a corner kick is. That's almost nothing." "It's a start." They were quiet for a moment, easy in the silence. "Thank you," Sofia said. "For what?" "For being someone I could say things out loud to. For making it feel possible." Nadia held the phone and looked out her window at the March evening, the sky a deep fading blue above the city's lights. "You did that yourself," she said. "I was just here." "Just being here is more than you know." Sofia said. One afternoon in April, a Saturday that had stretched past its usual boundaries into the long golden evening, they were in Sofia's apartment, working in parallel as they often did. Nadia at the kitchen table with her laptop, Sofia on the sofa with her sketchbook. At some point, Nadia looked up and found Sofia not working but watching her. "What?" Nadia said. "Can I draw you?" Nadia blinked. "Right now?" "Right now." "Stay exactly like that. Keep working." Nadia looked back at her screen and after a moment found her concentration again, and Sofia drew. Nadia could hear the pencil moving, that familiar soft sound, and the knowledge of being looked at this carefully, This steadily was both slightly unnerving and deeply moving. She stayed as she was. She worked. After an hour, Sofia put down her pencil. Done. Nadia got up and came to look over Sofia's shoulder at the sketchbook. The drawing showed her as she was, at the table. Hands on the keyboard, the slight forward lean of concentration. The particular way she held her chin. But something had happened in the translation from life to page. The way it always did with Sofia's work. The drawing didn't just show what she looked like, but what she was like. The quality of the absorption. The sense of a whole interior life continuing behind the still exterior. That's how you see me. Nadia said softly. That's who you are, Sofia said. Nadia looked at the drawing for a long time. She had spent years writing characters, trying to capture people on the page to make them real and specific and fully present. She had never been on the other side of that. She had never seen herself captured. She looked at the drawing and she understood, with something like vertigo, that she was loved. Not in the abstract, not in the way of declarations, but in the profound, specific, paying attention way of someone who had looked at her closely enough to see her. She turned to Sofia, who was watching her with that steady, open expression. I love you, Nadia said, simple, direct, the way she should have been all along. I know, Sofia said. And then I love you too. I have for months. Probably since the kitchen floor. The kitchen floor. I cried reading your book on the kitchen floor, and I thought, whoever wrote this sees people the way I wish someone would see me. She paused. And then I met you, and I thought, this is her. This is actually her. Nadia sat down beside her on the sofa, and Sofia put her head on Nadia's shoulder, and they looked out the window at the April evening, the city going golden in the long light. Gabriel the olive tree catching the last of the sun on his small leaves. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Nadia said. She didn't often allow herself to ask this kind of question. But she was learning slowly to hold things more lightly, to say the thing rather than carrying it. We're going to be more than okay, Sofia said without hesitation. How are you so sure? Because every time you look at me, I feel like someone is reading the building, Sofia said. And finding it interesting. Nadia pressed her cheek to the top of Sofia's head. It's the most interesting building I've ever encountered. You're going to put that in the novel. Aren't you? Absolutely. Sofia laughed. And the laughter was warm against Nadia's shoulder. And outside, the April evening continued its golden work, and the city did what cities do. And in this particular apartment on this particular afternoon, two women sat together in the light and held on to each other and to the life they were. Page by page and sketch by sketch, building together Dot in June. Clearing out a box she'd been meaning to clear for years. Nadia found a letter she'd written to herself 5 years ago. The prompt had been from a therapist she'd seen briefly. Write a letter to yourself about what you want. Not what you think you should want. What you actually want. She sat on the floor of her wardrobe with the letter in her hands and read it. She had written, I want someone to be curious about me. Not just attracted to me or fond of me, but curious. Someone who asks questions not to be polite, but because they genuinely want to know the answers. I want someone whose attention feels different from other people's attention. I want to be seen, not just looked at. She had written, I want to feel at home in my own life. I spent so long building walls that I've made the inside very small. I want to stop building walls. I want to make room. She had written, I want to laugh more. Not the polite social laugh. The real one. The one that comes out a little too loud and doesn't look elegant. She sat with the letter for a long time. Then she took out her phone and she called Sofia. Can you come over? She said when Sofia answered, right now? Please. 15 minutes, Sofia said, and Nadia could hear her already reaching for her coat. When Sofia arrived, Nadia handed her the letter without explanation and watched her read it. Sofia read it once and then read it again. Then she looked up. When did you write this? 5 years ago. Sofia was quiet. You're every single thing on that list, Nadia said. Every one. I didn't know that was what I was looking for until I found it in you. Sofia put the letter down carefully as though it were fragile. And she crossed the room and she held Nadia's face in both hands the way she had on the January street and she said, You are too. You know that? I'm trying to believe it, Nadia said. I'm working on it. I'll help, Sofia said. That can be my whole project. You have a lot of projects. I'm good at projects. You are, Nadia agreed. You're extremely good at projects. Sofia smiled, and the smile became a kiss. And the kiss became a long, warm afternoon. And somewhere in the middle of it, Nadia laughed, the real laugh. The one that comes out too loud and doesn't look elegant, and Sofia laughed with her. And they kept laughing until they couldn't breathe. And it was, by every measure that mattered, enough. More than enough. Everything. Barcelona in August was everything Sofia had said. The light genuinely different. Golden and deep and thick, as though someone had turned the warmth up several degrees, not just in temperature, but in quality. The city was ancient and alive simultaneously, its buildings layered with story. And Nadia walked through it beside Sofia and felt the particular joy of being somewhere wonderful with the person who made it mean more. Sofia's family lived in the Gracia neighborhood, in a narrow building that smelled of olive oil and old stone and the flowering vines that climbed the exterior. Her father, Alejandro, was a large, quiet man with Sofia's eyes and a mustache that seemed to belong to a different century. And when he opened the door, he looked at Sofia and then at Nadia and held out his hand and said, "Welcome to our home." "Thank you," Nadia said. "I'm very glad to be here." He looked at her for a moment, that searching, steady gaze that she recognized as entirely Sofia's inheritance, and then he nodded once, which seemed to be a form of acceptance, and stepped back to let them in. Sofia's mother, Carmen, was small and precise and immediately began asking about Nadia's book in a careful, heavily accented English that was far better than she claimed. And when Nadia answered her questions, Carmen looked at her with sharp dark eyes and then looked at Sofia and then looked back at Nadia and said, "You are both too serious. Come, eat." The paella was, as promised, extraordinary. Marco talked about football with the passionate incoherence of someone who is simply too many feelings about the subject for language to adequately contain. And Nadia had watched enough YouTube that she could ask 2 or 3 questions that made Marco look at her with the delighted astonishment of someone who had not expected to find a convert in his sister's girlfriend. Valentina was, as Sofia had warned, interrogatory, but the interrogation was warm, conducted over the course of a long afternoon on the family's rooftop terrace, with wine and a view of the Sagrada Familia in the middle distance. She asked Nadia about her writing, about her family, about how she had met Sofia, and Nadia answered everything honestly. And at some point Valentina said, "My sister has been waiting for someone patient enough for her." "I had to be patient with myself first," Nadia said. Valentina looked at her and then laughed, a short, surprised sound. "That is a very good answer," she said. On the last evening, sitting on the rooftop as the Barcelona night fell warm and dark around them and the city lit up below, Sofia reached over and took Nadia's hand. Her family had gone inside. They were alone with the lights and the warm air and the faint distant sound of music from somewhere in the streets below. "Well?" Sofia said. "Everything you said," Nadia said. "The light is different, and your family is extraordinary. And your mother's paella genuinely changed me as a person. And your brother is going to text me about football for the rest of my life. He already asked for your number. I gave it to him." Sofia squeezed her hand. "You didn't have to do that. I know." Nadia turned to look at her in the Barcelona dark, in the thick, warm August light, her face open and entirely certain. "I wanted to." Sofia looked back at her with those honey-brown eyes, and there was something in them that Nadia had learned to read. Over the months, that particular expression, that was the compound of love and recognition and gratitude, and the particular wonder of someone who has found the thing they wanted and found it was real. "I have something to tell you, Sofia," said Nadia waited. "I was thinking this afternoon about the first Saturday in the café and about what I felt that first day. And I want you to know," she paused. "I knew. Something in me knew immediately that you were going to matter. I just didn't know how or how much." "You didn't show it," Nadia said. "You were very composed." "I was terrified," Sofia said. "Composed is what I do when I'm terrified." She looked at the city below them, its lights scattered like stars. "I'm not terrified anymore." "Me neither," Nadia said. "We should have told each other sooner." We told each other exactly when we were ready, Nadia said. Sofia considered this. You're right. She looked at her. You're often right. It's extremely annoying. It's a gift, Nadia said. Sofia laughed and leaned her head against Nadia's shoulder, and they sat like that under the Barcelona sky. Warm and close, listening to the distant music. Watching the lights of a city that had made one of them. Thinking about the city they would go back to together. Thinking about the autumn ahead and the Saturdays and the café and the fire. And the novel that was almost finished and the new commission Sofia had just taken, a whole street of Victorian terraces. She was excited. She'd been talking about it for a week and thinking about all of it. The ordinary, extraordinary texture of a shared life being built, one day at a time, one hand extended. One table shared. On the second Saturday of October, 1 full year exactly. After the morning when a woman had spread her sketchbooks across Nadia's corner table and looked up with honey brown eyes and an amused smile, Nadia's novel was published. It was dedicated. For us this time and every time, the publication party was at the bookshop where Nadia had done her reading the previous February, which felt right and circular. There were people from her publishing house and colleagues and old friends and Nadia's mother, who had driven 3 hours and was already crying before she'd finished her first glass of wine. Which was exactly what Nadia had predicted. Sofia was there. In a deep blue dress that made Nadia briefly lose her train of thought mid-sentence while speaking to her editor. She was talking to Valentina, who had flown in from Milan for the occasion and was being her characteristically interrogatory self with Nadia's editor, which Nadia suspected the editor would find either charming or extremely alarming. At some point in the evening, in the warm, crowded bookshop buzz, Sofia found her way to Nadia's side and stood close, their arms touching, and leaned in to say in her ear, "Your mother is wonderful. She's overwhelming," Nadia said. "That's the same thing," Sofia said. "She told me she knew the moment she read the dedication that it was about someone real." "What did you tell her?" "I told her, yes, that it was about someone real." She paused. "She said she was glad. She said she'd been waiting for you to let someone in." Nadia looked across the room at her mother, who caught her eye and smiled. The kind of smile that contained an entire argument, a request, years of hoping, and Nadia felt the particular love of being known by someone who was once the whole world to you and who is now, with some gratitude and some grief, only a part. She looked back at Sofia. "Ready?" "For what?" "To leave. I've been here 2 hours and I'm ready to go home." "It's your party. It's been a long year. I want to sit by your window with tea and be quiet with you." Sofia smiled, that full, unguarded smile. The one she should have come with a warning about and didn't. "Let's go." They said their goodbyes to the editor, to the publicist, to Valentina, to Nadia's mother, who held Nadia for a long time and then held Sofia's face in both hands the way mothers do and looked at her seriously and said, in Twi, something that Nadia translated afterward as, "Take care of each other." And Sofia, who did not speak Twi, seemed to understand anyway, and nodded. They walked out into the October night. The same October night, more or less, as the one that had begun all of this. Same cool air, same amber streetlights, same city doing what cities do. Nadia stopped on the pavement outside the bookshop. She tilted her head back and looked at the sky. Clear enough tonight to see a few stars between the buildings. "What?" Sofia said. "Nothing. Just..." Nadia lowered her head and looked at her. At this woman. At the darkness of her hair and the warmth of her eyes and the small scar on her eyebrow that had its own small story. And the way the streetlight fell over her face just now. The same way it had on a January night when everything became possible. "I keep thinking about that first day," Nadia said. "How everything was already in motion and neither of us knew it." "I knew something," Sofia said. "I didn't know what. Were you scared?" "Of what?" "Of this." "Of how much?" Sofia thought about it genuinely, the way she thought about everything with her full attention. "I'm not scared of how much," she said at last. "I used to be. I used to think wanting too much from one person was a kind of danger, that you could lose more the more you wanted." She paused. "But with you, I don't feel like I'm risking something. I feel like I'm building something." Nadia was very still. The city moved around them. "We're building something," she said. Yes, Sophia said, and then, because it was October and it had been a year. And because this was the right moment in the way that some moments are specifically and exactly right, Sophia stepped forward and cupped Nadia's face in both hands and looked at her. From very close, the way she looked at buildings she intended to draw, seeing the whole and the detail at once. Seeing the structure and the surface and the history and the life. I have been yours, Sophia said softly. Since the kitchen floor. She smiled. Her thumb traced Nadia's cheekbone. And this time she held her gaze, clear and steady and full of the whole year of it. Full of October and January and Barcelona and August and all the Saturdays and the fire and the coffee and the morning. Light, this time. You're mine. The word landed in Nadia's chest like the last line of a chapter that finally, after years of trying, had come out exactly right. She kissed her. Right there on the October pavement with the year of it and the kiss and the future of it and the love of it. The specific. Chosen, wholehearted, clearly said love of it. When they came apart. Nadia leaned her forehead against Sophia's and closed her eyes and felt, in the dark behind her eyelids, the texture of her own life, its weight and warmth, its specific and irreplaceable quality of hers. Yes, she said. Yours. 3 years later, the cafe on Marlowe Street was exactly the same. This was one of the things Nadia loved most about it, its absolute commitment to being itself. Dark wooden beams. Jewel-toned velvet chairs. And the fire lit as it always was on October 1st. She arrived at her usual time, 8:45 on the second Saturday of October. She had her bag, her laptop, her notebooks. She'd been working on a new novel, the fifth. Actually about two women who build a life together out of small things. Coffee and morning light and the architecture of attention. She went to the corner table. It was empty. She sat down and Iris was already bringing her cortado oat milk. 2 sugars and a pastry without being asked. Because this was known. She's parking the car, Iris said. And she said it to the fire, not to Nadia. Nadia smiled. She opened her laptop. She began to write. 8 minutes later, the door opened. And Sophia came in with her scarf wound twice around her neck. The same cream-colored scarf. Older now, beloved and used, and she unwound it as she walked. And she shed her coat and she had her sketchbook under one arm and she was still so beautiful that Nadia, who had been looking at her every day for 3 years, felt it as vividly as she had on that very first January pavement. Sophia sat down across from her. She placed her sketchbook on the table, ordered her coffee, looked at Nadia with those honey brown eyes. Morning, she said. Morning, Nadia said. They smiled at each other. The fire crackled. Outside, the October rain came down in silver sheets against the window, and then they both bent to their work, pencil and keyboard. Line and word, and the cafe was warm around them. And the fire did what fires do, and the morning went on. Ordinary and magnificent theirs.